ผู้เข้าร่วมการประชุมทุกท่านค่ะยินดีต้อนรับทุกท่านกลับเข้าสู่การประชุมระดับชาติว่าด้วยสิทธิมนุษยชนว่าด้วยธุรกิจกับสิทธิมนุษยชนครั้งที่3อีกครั้งหนึ่งนะคะลำดับต่อไปจะเป็นการอภิปรายเซสชั่นแรกนะคะในเรื่องพัฒนาการสำคัญของภาคการเงินในการบูรณาการหลักการ ESG เพื่อประเมินภาคธุรกิจโดยเราได้รับเกียรติจากผู้อภิปรายคือมิสเตอร์โซฮังควาง Vice Chairman Asia Head Global Corporate Clients Rebel Bank คุณสวิสาอาริยปรัชญารองผู้อำนวยการฝ่ายกลยุทธ์สถาบันการเงินธนาคารแห่งประเทศไทยดร.อดิษฐ์หลายชูไทยเลขานุการบริษัทและรองกรรมการผู้จัดการอาวุโสธนาคารกสิกรไทยและผู้ดำเนินรายการคือมิสเตอร์ชอนลีผู้เชี่ยวชาญด้านธุรกิจกับสิทธิมนุษยชน UNDP Bangkok Regional Hub May I invite all speakers and moderator on stage. Please welcome. Yes, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. A very inspiring morning I think we've had so far. I think you would agree. Very strong statements from the head of Global Compact Network Thailand. Very strong statements from the Minister of the Ministry of Justice, Thailand. And of course, UNDP's country director for Thailand, also providing, I think, some very heartfelt thoughts about the subject matter we're talking about today. As we've heard this morning, consumers and shareholders, employees, people from all walks of life are demanding that companies and banks do more to address the environmental, social, and governance challenges of our time. We call this ESG for short, environmental, social, and governance. We will use that acronym a lot today. It is an important acronym to get used to because it is how business often talks about human rights issues, climate change issues. So you'll hear from our panelists on ESG quite extensively. We've also heard that governments are looking to the private sector to help them meet their sustainable development ambitions. Governments are also turning to the private sector to show respect for human rights as they endorse the UN guiding principles on business and human rights. And we look to Thailand's leadership in this area for developing their national action plan on business and human rights. Thailand is also pulling along other countries such as Indonesia and Malaysia to develop their own national action plans. My understanding too, having just visited Korea, is that South Korea and Japan will also be developing plans of this nature. It's interesting too that it's not just citizens, employees, it's also CEOs that have acknowledged that their obligations are not merely to shareholders only. They also go to stakeholders. In last week's Economist, the lead story was, what are companies for? A strange question, frankly, to be asking, what are companies for? I thought we all knew what companies were for. They're for generating value, creating jobs, and making a profit. But now society is asking companies to actually engage on environmental, social, and governance issues. The stage is seemingly set for sustainable finance, the subject matter of today's panel. So the stage is set for sustainable finance to really take off. And yet, as we'll hear today, there are still headwinds. There are still challenges to ensuring that all companies integrate ESG considerations in their investment decisions and in their operations. We see companies moving at different speeds as they adopt the ESG, And certain industries seemingly have different incentives for integrating ESG, some industries moving much slower than others. The standards for assessing ESG are also not necessarily agreed, certainly not at the international level. There are many different criteria that give definition to what we mean by environmental risks, social risks, governance risks. And in fact, the S in ESG is perhaps the most undefined and misunderstood area of all. Human rights performance is a new area for many businesses and including governments. And it's important that we start to understand what human rights performance means, because when the National Action Plan for Thailand comes out, it's going to strongly encourage companies to take human rights due diligence and disclosures very seriously. And of course, the MOJ and UNDP is also working with the the Security and Exchange Commission of Thailand and ensuring accurate and transparent disclosures. But because ESG and human rights performance are new for many companies, banks, for the government, and even international organizations, I like to think that we're on this journey together. I like to think that we are at the beginning, or maybe the end of the beginning, of a very robust discussion, and at a pivot point in the history of capitalism. And that history is taking place right here in Thailand on this very day. I'm very grateful that we have a group of panelists here, very knowledgeable. They bring their knowledge, their expertise, and unique perspectives to our discussion. I have here in the middle, Mr. So Hong Kwang, who is the Vice Chairman and Asia Head of Rabobank's Global Corporate Clients. In this role, Mr. So is responsible for building corporate investment banking relationships in Asia. Prior to his work at Rabobank, Mr. So also worked for ABN AMRO for 20 plus years. Kun Savisa Arya Pratya is the Deputy Director of the Financial Institution Strategy Department at the Bank of Thailand and heads the Regulatory Coordination and Sustainable Banking Division. She also has very rich experience in ASEAN negotiating banking liberalization, which I think must have been a very thorny and complex task. To my far right is Kun Adi Laishutai. He's the Senior Executive Vice President and Company Secretary for Kasakon Bank. He's worked for the bank in different capacities since 1997. But I note too that he has a very deep research background as well, with a PhD in public health. I think knowledge of health serves him well in his position, under which he must experience extreme stress at times, yes? Each panelist will come up to this podium and give a 10 to 15-minute presentation. I may ask a question, but after the presentations, I will then open it up for questions from the audience. And I hope you will think about the questions you may want to ask ahead of time. With that, I say thank you again for this opportunity, and I turn the floor over to Mr. So. Mr. So.
Thank you for having me here this morning. Glad to be here, and it's an honor as well. Sean, thanks for the introduction. I just want to open up this discussion with just a slide on Rabobank, and then about four points or four observations that I could just share, and we can have a better discussions over the panel subsequently. Growing a better world together. One might be forgiven to think that this might have been the tagline for today's conference. But this is actually the mission of a Rabobank. Yeah? So the mission of Rabobank is to growing a better world together. So we are a food and agriculture bank. That's the grow part. And obviously together with the community at large, our clients, inclusive consumers, and growing a better world together. That's the mission of Rabobank. Encompasses the vision. The vision is to banking for the Netherlands, we're a Dutch bank, and banking for food in the world, we're a food bank. Rabobank is a global food and agri leader. We serve most major food chain throughout our extensive presence in 41 countries. To date, we finance food and agri business globally, amounting close to about 100 billion euros in assets. Sustainability is at the heart of what we do, and we are ranked second globally in Sustainalytics, making us an industry leader in sustainable financing. Agri-Tree Fund, under the auspices between Rabo and United Nations, a partnership with them, focuses on, one, contributing to the sustainable and efficient agricultural production. Two, preventing deforestation and stimulating reforestation. Three, improving rural farmers' livelihood. This is actually a KPI which contributes 10% to my personal balance scorecard. So my personal balance scorecard in Asia requires me to make sure that we walk this talk. Another aspect of our sustainability on the global front includes UN 17. UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals have a very fundamental place in our banking for food strategy. The first introduction I want, banks are integrating ESG. They're already integrating ESG into the business with clients. NGFS is a coalition of central banks and financial supervisors. Consists of 42 members, mostly of developed countries, but also Asian countries like Thailand, China, Japan. And they have all called for a collective action among the financial industry to integrate sustainability factors into decision-making processes and for consistency across climate and environmental disclosures. UNEP-FI, Principles for Responsible Banking, was issued in July this year, just July this year, to provide a standardized framework for sustainable and responsible banking to align the banking sector to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs I mentioned earlier, and the Paris Accord. I think this was mentioned earlier by Ronald. According to the Worldwide Fund 2019 Sustainability Finance Report, which looks at ESG integration across 35 ASEAN banks, most of these ASEAN banks now recognize that ESG risks and opportunities lie within their own lending portfolio and can impact their business. And Rabobank uses a proprietary sustainability assessment tool since 2007 for our food and agri client, where we make detailed assessment of our client sustainability to produce a client photo and rank the client in their sustainability practices. Second point I want to touch on is about the evolution of sustainability financing. Sustainability financing started with the green bond principle, which required identified green projects and specific application of the proceeds of the fundraising. This has evolved over to the recent development of sustainability-linked loans, SLL, based on LMA standard for lenders to encourage and to improve the general sustainability performance of borrowers like yourselves. So while the green bond market is now $140 billion in size, the SLL market has grown rapidly to $40 billion last year. SGX in Singapore introduced mandatory compulsory sustainability reporting on a comply or explain basis in June 2016, while the Thai Bankers Association recently issued Sustainable Banking Guidelines for Responsible Lending in August this year. In ASEAN, an estimated $3 trillion of green investments is needed from 2016 to 2030 in sectors such as infrastructure, renewable energy, energy efficiency, food, agriculture, and land use. Rabobank is a pioneer in this business sustainable debt capital markets. So we're one of the 8 founding members of the Equator Principles. We recently this year led to what I call KPI link syndication with Olam, one of the world's largest supply chain company based in Singapore, with COFCO, one of China's largest food company, and we are in the midst of an execution of the largest sugar player in this region, which, as you guys know, is Thai. So helping a Thai producer to have a KPI-linked financing transaction. What are these KPIs? These include margin link to Sustainalytics rating, economic prosperity, diversity and inclusion, healthy ecosystem, reduction of greenhouse emission, etc. So in short, the evolution of this sustainability financing towards more specific KPI targeted is good news for all of us. Makes it easier and creates a trend for banks to support you in your own sustainability agenda. Challenges that we faced. Through our established track record on sustainability financing, we have observed that success only happens when there's involvement from the very top, the tone from the top. Executive management, finance, sustainability teams. Rabo has been working on multiple global initiatives, and I just wanted to raise 2 in Asia. Last year, we had our inaugural food loss challenge to battle the issue of food waste. As you know, more than 40% of all food produced are wasted, 40%. So that was our team. This year, we have Sustainable Ag Asia Challenge, and this brings about technology solution. We want to bring technology solution to connect with our clients and our partners, such as ADM, Bayer, Temasek, ADB, etc., to foster collaboration and catalyze a change through technology. However, while banks want to encourage sustainable financing, we also want to avoid what I call greenwashing. So the KPI should be linked to science-based targets and measurable positive outcomes. In addition, of course, to incorporating robust environmental and social safeguards to mitigate potential negative impacts. My last point clearly is for all stakeholders to prepare and collaborate further. So not just banks, but companies like yourself will be impacted by global sustainable financing development. So successful syndication originated by even our ASEAN banks, our Thai banks, will be impacted by global banks which are adapting to changing sustainable finance landscape, increasing their minimum ESG requirement for borrowers. Listed companies will be expected to better manage climate-related risks and disclose them in line with TFCD, the Task Force in Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. BlackRock CEO Larry Fink says that in the next 5 years, just in the next 5 years, all investors will measure a company's impact on society, government, and the environment to determine its worth. Discussions, forums, and working groups provide a good avenue for all relevant participants to voice opinion together, share expertise, and work together towards a meaningful journey. Instead of NGO and government accusing companies and banks of wrongdoing, a partnership with these stakeholders is the best way forward. Example regionally in ASEAN includes obviously the Bangkok Declaration on combating marine debris, as well as a transboundary haze pollution, both of which is a slow journey. Indonesia only rectified the latter in 2014, but a good journey towards a very, very important objective. So in summary, I just want to basically say the world is definitely moving towards sustainability, and banks and companies like yourself in ASEAN will be affected directly and some indirectly. Your bankers are embracing sustainable financing, opportunities and initiatives, so please approach your bankers in partnership. And I hope all stakeholders like us all in the room must and can work together to grow a better world. Thank you so much.
An excellent presentation covering so many things, including the need for collaboration and the challenges of integration. Mr. So, if I could just ask you right now, while you're here and with the microphone in hand, we heard a lot about the government's effort to adopt a national action plan on business and human rights. Without going into any detail, perhaps you could talk about how Rabobank is ensuring human rights issues are embedded in their financing activities.
I mentioned earlier that. So, I think Ronald said that at the core of the change must be the banks, the financial institution, because they are the gas that drives the car, without which the car doesn't move. So if you believe that financing is the engine or the bloodline, then at Rabobank, I mentioned earlier, every credit client, so every client that borrows money from us will be reviewed, as some of the bankers in this room know, once a year. More than 15% weightage is ascribed to what I mentioned earlier about our proprietary tool. It's called Gaia, actually. Gaia means love the earth, yeah? The Gaia tool make assessment of how sustainable these people are and adds the score to my credit score. If the scores are low, they will reduce the credit desirability of the client. If the scores are bad, we may have to say goodbye.
And you might have like a score for child labor risk or something like this?
SDG 17 principles, right? SDG 16, I think, is about
peace and justice and migration.
Peace, justice, strong institution, and we are a big subscriber to that. And I think within that, human rights is definitely one of a very core area. This Gaia tool that we have, out of the 15% weightage, I believe human rights practices is very big there as well. So I think these are important areas that Rabobank as a financier do. I think the big one, obviously, earlier mentioned, is obviously in aquaculture, where some of these practices can be prevalent. Others include plantations, crops, and so on in the region, which also have issues there. So these are all scored in our bank to see whether we would continue business with them.
Fantastic. And that's a very clear example of integration of ESG into client lending and project finance. So thank you very much, Mr. So. Let's turn now to Kun Savisa from the Bank of Thailand.
Okay, thank you very much. Before I begin my presentation, I'd like to thank you, the organizers, the Ministry of Justice, the Global Compact Network, and the UNDP for inviting me to be a part of this very important conversation on ESG and to be among such distinguished panelists. So if you had invited a financial regulator, to be on this panel 3 to 5 years ago, you probably would not have heard the word green and financial regulation together in the same conversation. But now, our financial institutions in Thailand are actually hiring sustainable environmental scientists and environmental engineers into their sustainability departments. So this is something that has been happening very quickly in the past 2 to 3 years. Okay, so, as the financial regulator, the central bank has primarily been focused a lot on the financial stability. And if you look at the ESG principles, you probably notice we focus a lot on the S and the G side. So on the S side, we looked a lot in the financial inclusion and ensuring that everyone had access to financial services at low and reasonable prices. And so we worked together with the financial industry to come out with products such as the basic banking account, as well as introduction of regulations to improve customer protection as well. And of course, to prevent predatory lending, we also work together on responsible lending guidelines. So these are examples of some S that we have really focused on in the past. And on the governance side, of course, we have made sure there are good risk management and governance systems in place. as well as to promote the digitization of the financial industry and to make sure that the economy is very efficient. So the east part has been lacking, and this is a fact. And we have, other than making sure that our buildings are carbon neutral and that we don't use too much paper when we print, we haven't really been doing so much on the E. But it doesn't mean that we're not doing it now, right? So, and this is very important as a conversation because, we're not doing this because we want to be good people. We're doing this because it is actually something that's necessary. We have, as a financial industry, we realize that climate risk is a source of financial risk. And this entails both physical and transition risk. So what we mean by physical risk is, for example, the change in climate would influence, have on business operations. For example, flooding. By 2030, I think the WF report says that 40% of Bangkok will be inundated, and that rice exports, would fall by 20%. So this is a big, as a rice exporter, this is very important for us, and also as food security for the world, where we are main supplier of rice. And there's a little picture of a turtle here. And for the ocean, for the tourism industry in Thailand, it's 12% of the GDP, and hires around 6 million people in the sector. So if this is affected, of course, the whole economy will be affected by these physical risks. So other than physical risks, we also have what we call transition risk. And transition risk is as economies around the world transition to a low carbon economy. We have the EU now that's working towards the sustainable economy. And so by 2030, the EU have a plan where they will import only from companies with ESG policies in place. And this will impact us as we export to the EU as our fourth largest partner. And it's not just the EU, it's other countries as well. China itself is also moving very fast on the sustainability front. And investors, from our discussions with investors, when they come to see us at a bank, they tell us that they're now looking into policies, investing in companies that have ESG policies. And a lot of sovereign wealth funds are already changing their investment portfolios. And we also see the rating companies have also been adopting the ESG indices as well. So this is, it's not all gloom and doom, but these are changes that are happening, globally, and it's happening very fast in just probably 2 years ago. And, there's still a lot of opportunity. So the WEF says that they need around 5.7 trillion annually for green infrastructure investment. And there's an additional 0.7 trillion per year. So this is a lot of investment opportunities for businesses. And I'm sure many of you will probably realize this is much more than I. But there's a lot of innovation that can be coming to the sustainability business as companies drive to offer more renewable energy and to offer more sustainable products. And the younger generation, the exchanging customer needs, they're also demanding that we actually step up to the game and provide services that are more sustainable. So we can see, I think this morning, Mr. Reynolds mentioned Greta Thunberg, how a 14-year-old can actually tell us, that we need to act. So these are, some of the expectations. And at a global level, what have the regulators been doing? So the financial regulators, have discussed this now over the past year in all the meetings of regulatory supervisors at the BIS level and in all the boardrooms. So we realize this is something that we must act. And of course, we also need to learn on what we can do together as a financial sector. There are two big groups. There's a Sustainable Banking Network, which is funded by the IFC, and they have a set of guidelines, on what we can work together and we share experiences. And on the NGFS side, I think Mr. HK mentioned earlier, is a network for greening the financial system. This was founded only less than 2 years ago by the Netherlands Bank and the Bank of France. And since then, the membership has grown to over 40 members, and Thailand was probably member around 25. So, and this is the beginning of the year in January. So in just 1 year, we've had more than 20 memberships come into the organization. And what do we do, as regulators? You may wonder. We talk about green. What we do is we actually talk about how we, as a financial industry, can, for example, look at climate-related risks and how they feed into the financial sector. So at the moment, it's a lot of research and a lot of looking at the data and analyzing on what we can do. But, and some deliverables will be coming out later this year as well. We will be working on risk scenarios that can be incorporated into bank stress tests as well. And another thing that is very important is this year, we also came out with a report, call to action. But they made 6 recommendations to central bank supervisors on what we can do. So a lot of them is, that we have to lead by example. So as ourselves, we will have to also integrate ESG policies into the bank-owned operations. And also, but a big challenge is, how do we get the data in order to analyze the financial risk? So, and before I move on, NGFS, as I mentioned, has only begun around 2 years ago. And next year, I'm proud to say that they have selected Thailand to be the 3rd country in which they will host their annual meeting. So this is the first time that they are going outside of the Netherlands and outside of France, from Europe to Thailand. On a more domestic front, we talk with international collaboration. But what have we been doing inside Thailand itself? A lot of you, as companies may already know, Stock Exchange of Thailand has been very active on this with the THSI index and the reporting guidelines on sustainability. And the Securities Exchange Commission has also been working on ASEAN Green Bond standards together with other ASEAN countries, and also on disclosure criteria for social and green bonds. And for the Bank of Thailand ourselves, we have been very active in the past year. So last year, we hosted our first Bangkok Sustainable Banking Forum. And that was kind of like a key catalyst. Since then, many financial institutions have set up sustainability departments. And our goal is not to just raise awareness of the risk that comes with sustainability, but to also have the financial institutions internalize ESG into their daily operations. So we do this, by making sure that we have a strategy in place. And as a result, we set up a dedicated division this year to look at sustainability issues at Bank of Thailand, which I'm proud to be heading. And we have a small team of 5 people to help us with this. And we also have been working on making sure that we have a hub of information for people to, when they want to read about sustainable finance. And this is on the Bank of Thailand website. And we have, if you're interested, we have videos and clips from all our sustainable banking forum that we just organized earlier this year. And we also have quarterly capacity building workshops for all the financial industry. And we work together with the Thai Bankers Association and the WWF as well. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, we are a member of the NGFS. On the Thai Bankers Association, they have been very active as well. And this year, it was the first time that we had 15 Thai financial institutions signed together for the guidelines on responsible lending. So, by the end of next year, they will have processes in place and how to integrate the ESG into their lending practices. And of course, this is something that's a journey, and we still have a lot to go on. And but as a financial regulator, our role is to be more of a steward. How can we create a strategy and work together with the global standards, such as the UN, UNEP, as it came out with the principles on responsible banking, the TCFD. How can we align that to what we are doing here in Thailand? And to also collaborate with other international organizations, such as the IFC, the World Bank, the UN, as well as other regulators as well. And one thing that is on the catalyst side, something that we are now starting work on, is to have kind of an ecosystem where we can help nudge the financial industry towards more sustainable practices. So what does this mean? This means, we could have, we don't really want to do regulations, but we want it to be something that comes out from financial industry itself, but we want to give them incentives and to give, things that we can use to promote sustainability. Many countries, what we've been doing is looking at taxonomy For example, this is a definition of, what is green, what is not green. In order to be able to access, what the risk, we need to actually be able to define it first. So this is an important building block that we are starting to look at as well in order to be able to collect data. So once we have data, then we can decide, what policies we want to act on afterwards. And of course, we have to work with other regulators as well on the incentives. So we are setting up a joint group with the Ministry of Finance, the Securities Exchange Commission, the SEC, as well as the OIC as well, to work on this matter. So it's been a very busy year, but we want to take the sustainable out of sustainable financing, because we want all financing to be really sustainable. So I'll end here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kun Savisa. Very thorough presentation of what the Bank of Thailand is doing to embrace ESG. And I'm struck by how robust the initiatives are and how enthusiastic banks and the general public have been on your agenda. It sounds like this is growing almost too fast, and I hope you have a team as strong as yours. Let me just ask you a question based on that last slide, the sustainable building blocks. I talk to businesses a lot, and they say, we're not afraid of regulation. What we're really afraid of is, first, not everybody, my competitors not abiding by the regulations. And secondly, sometimes the regulations are unclear. I do note that you made mention of this as well, that sometimes coming up with the definitions is difficult, the taxonomy bit here. Now, what kind of challenges have you had in defining what is green, for green bonds, for example, or what constitutes the S in ESG? I think businesses want to know exactly what other businesses and the regulators are talking about when they're talking about these terms. Tell me about some of the challenges of coming to a common criteria or common taxonomy, if you would.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a very challenging question.
Sorry, but
but as but taxonomy is indeed something. It's one of the building blocks I think that we could start out, and it's something that there is no standard throughout the world at the moment. So it's a big challenge. We have the EU that earlier this year came out with a 600-page the taxonomy on what they consider green, what's sustainable, and then there's a definition of what do you consider green, light green, dark green, brown. So you have to look at the different shades of the definitions, and China has their own taxonomy as well, and they did this in 6 months, but they're able to do this very fast. And I think the challenge for us is how do we work together with all the stakeholders, because it's not just the financial institutions, but we have to work together with the environmental ministry who's in charge of environment, and to see that we have a cohesive standard, and one that actually works for Thailand as well.
Indeed, and I hope you will also work with the Ministry of Justice.
Yes, of course.
Especially as they bring our the business and human rights agenda forward and a whole government approach as well. That's my timer. You were well within time. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kun Savisa. Really, a fantastic presentation. And Kun Adit from Kasikorn Bank has very big shoes to fill indeed, but no doubt he will fill them. Kun Adit, please take the stage.
Thank you. There's a benefit of talking last, so I can be brief and I can say that all of the above. I was recruited to Kasikorn Bank, or K-Bank to be short, long time ago, more than 20 years ago. And back then I was so naive and I was so excited. But after all these years, I actually went through a lot of things. So Kasikorn Bank is just like a couple to me, that we went during the up times and the down times, and then we're still together. Sometimes I just feel, okay, I'm not happy. But sometimes I feel happy, but most of the time, on average, things are good. So less than 5 years, I will reach my retirement age. So I love to tell the story, what I had gone through. ESG, the three little word, environment, social, governance, they have been with Thailand and with the bank for all along, in various degrees. Sometimes they will come formally, sometimes will be informal. They're all here. I recall that when I first came in, you know what my first job was? To raise capital with the big boss. So we went around the world and raised capital because at that time it was during the Asian crisis. I recall that. But on top of that, I remember it was the first time that I heard of the term risk management. I recall we worked with Oliver Wyman to set up the framework for risk management, and nobody knew what it was until the Asian crisis hit us. And then that was the key issue that if you know the risk well enough, then we have a chance to survive next time perhaps. Social part, when I walked in and then I got to be an employee of the bank, on the social part, I recall that this is the bank that deeply concerned and have the conscience to do well with the community. They even have a small face in our march, our song, the song of the bank. Everywhere we go, we will bring prosperity to the community. That is a part of the song that is like a company anthem. So it's been with us. I remember that when the JSI invited us to fill out the questionnaire, it was put on my desk for probably more than a week because I thought, what a thick questionnaire. And then asked so many questions, and I thought it could be a waste of time to go through that and then make the whole bank to fill out that questionnaire. But after a while, I actually took a look into the questionnaire, and I thought, oh my God, Robico Sam was brilliant. They were a group of genius people. Why? Because they put all the possible risks in the whole universe and saying that these are the risks that a corporate should see and ask difficult questions. Do you recognize all of these risks? Do you know what these are? Do you have the policy to mitigate all of these? What kind of action you do? What kind of measurements you have? How are you going to see how well you have done? And what kind of things that you have disclosed to the public? Brilliant. That was the first time that I thought, okay, might as well try, so that we know the gap that what we do and the gap to the international standard. It's just like what I have heard from Mr. So. That's a world-class bank. There's still a lot of us to do in the future. Okay? But all of these, when you're looking at all of these kind of things, when you look closely, it makes sense. When it makes sense, it makes us look into that and then try to think about it and do something about it. And I'm telling you this story because we went through quite a few years of terminology, of new terms. By the time we get a grip on CSR, I said, no. CSR is not enough. You have to have the in-process CSR. What the heck is that? Well, doing something that makes sense and linked to your business, fine. By the time we started to think about the programs to link to that, the new term comes. SD, no, you don't think about just only activities you do, think about the bigger picture. So I'm just saying this because this is part of the pain that we have gone through. It's just like a little boy sitting in a small room full of parents, grandparents, and everybody that he knows and say, you should do this. Mom say, you should do this. Dad say, you should do this. And everybody say, you should do this. If I have a magic wand, I wave one and everybody will be gone. But leaving just only one warm, single voice saying that this is something you should do. This is something that would be good for you and everybody that you know. So if you do well, everybody will be better off, and you will be a good boy, okay? So this is a whisper to something that when there is some critical issues, perhaps it should be unified. It should give the very clear single message and then craft it to the audience or to the ears of the audience. Well, when you look at all of this, it's all about risk, really. So if risk is important to bank, why? We make money from risk. So that means what? Well, if we run that well, we contain the risk well, we will get something from that. We call that return. Long-term goal of our bank is actually just to have the risk-adjusted return, sustainable risk-adjusted return. By that alone, it implies a lot. It implies that, yes, we're going to look at risk. We see risk. If it makes sense, we're going to try to take care of that. And we will trade between high return, high risk, low return, low risk, and then try to find a balance in between and just say, well, too much risk, too high return, it will not last. Too low risk, too low return, we're not going to make anything. And we will not make people who we term as our shareholders or investors happy. So I'm saying this because that is what it's all about us. That's the language we understand, risk, because we make money from risk. Everything that will come into different things or different terminology, but at the end of the day, it is all about risk. A bank like us will understand because it's our duty to mitigate those risks. So what can we do? There are two major roles as a bank, really. One is just a lender. We are a part of the very important mechanism to propel the growth of the economy. We are also a part of the whole society just to ensure that we do the right thing and then make the whole society better off. So these are the two very important roles. But where's the balance? Where's the balance? As a lender, sometimes if we look at ourselves that we provide funding to the business to grow, that's a good thing. But in a way, we also have the say into that. If it doesn't make sense, we probably will step away from that. If it makes sense, we probably would do that. And that is the key to make money on this. Be reasonable, understand that. And in the banking language, we call that understand the risk, and then reduce the risk to the acceptable level. If you do that well, it will happen over and over again. By the way, when you're talking about sustainability here, bad economy doesn't mean that we're going to get rich, but that is fine. But over the long term, we will exist. That matters. So it's not about getting rich today, getting poor tomorrow. No, it's about existence. If we do well today and we trade off for something that will appear as big money for the sake of not taking too high risk, there's a chance that tomorrow we will be around. And that is exactly what we want to be. I'm talking a little bit about this one because as a lender, there are a lot of things that involve a lot of parties. But this one, I want to say that all the operations in the bank will be well integrated and matched with all different levels in the bank, from people who run for business up to the board of directors, go through all kinds of things. So if you want to make this happen, the tone at the top must be set. We can't do things when the top just said, no, this is the area that we want to do. But boss, this will get into something that we don't want to do, like maybe violating the human rights and all of that. And they said, I don't care. Guess what? We can't do it. But if the upstairs, not upstairs, at the top, they just said, this is very important. This is very important just only to us, but to society and the whole world. This is the human rights issue. We need to be careful. We need to integrate that into the whole process in the bank. Then the whole organization will move along with that. That's why every time that we talk about the new things, we talk about the right things to do and all of that, if the tone at the top is set properly, the whole organization will move that way. So this is very important. If you want to start from the top. If you want to do something different from yesterday, start from the top. If you want to do something in the future, start from the top. This is just to show you that as a lender, there's the whole process that we can get involved and then ingrain that into our day-to-day operation. This is the example on project financing, and we call this process screening. You can see that on the top here, the red arrows here, we call that exclusion list. So something that we detect that probably will violate any human rights or other things that related to social issues, environmental issues, or the governance issue, if they are in this kind of list, in some areas, we kick them out from day one. And some of the sectors that we want to focus, we will focus from here. If they survive this kind of screening test, they will go into this. We divide the whole business deals into 3 groups. The first one, very high on the impact under the aspect of the social and environmental issue. This one is moderate, and this one is small. Okay, so the high impact, if the amount of loans are so small, less than 300 million baht, we say, no, we are not going to get involved with that. Higher than that, in the high impact, viable, we're going to go through the whole process here, meaning we're going to submit that to the CG board, or corporate governance board. Why is it important? Because if we're going to get into this, we need the participation at the board and the endorsement from the board to say that this is a very high risk area. Are we going to get into that? If they say no, then it's no. They say yes, it will go through this kind of process. And then we will say yes and keep monitoring this loan. Okay? We are not perfect. There's a lot of things that we have to do. We are not quite there yet, but this is the first step that we think to put everything into the internal process, and we have to keep doing that until one day we just say, okay, this is part of our DNA. We do this every day. It's no pain anymore, or we get numb to the point that we don't feel pain anymore. So this is going to be a normal process here. Just to get to the second point, that from time to time, like once a year, we're going to have to look at the whole portfolio and see whether people have changed their behaviors or not. Because sometimes at the first day that the money leaves the bank and then help the business to do their own things, after a while, they change behavior. So we need to have this kind of process to monitor, and in a way, it's just like a portfolio auditing. We audit the whole portfolio, and then we just see that, okay, there are at least 3 groups that are prone to violation of the S&G. The first one, suppliers. The second one, employees. That is related to the bank, and customers. We are talking about lending. That would be pretty much the third box at the bottom, customers. What are we going to do? We have the checklist. We look into the potential risks. For example, the areas that you may not think about, customers, and then privacy. We are into the digital world. Everything is linked together so fast, and then you may not even know that your information has been released to many places. Okay? That is something that under the human rights, we consider that to be the violation of personal rights. We need to take care of that. So we check on this. Employees, we look into whether the same thing. By themselves, are we taking good care of them as the human being? When they are sick, do we take care of them? Do we try to make them have work and life balance? Are we trying to protect their human rights and then the basic rights as employees? And when they serve customers, are they doing the right things when they serve customers? So these are the risks, and then we have the checklist, and guess what? If we find something that will not fit with the criteria that we say, we're going to notify them and say that, please take care of this. If they can't, unfortunately, eventually we have to terminate that. It's tough. Why? Because this is something new. And when we get into this kind of deal, although this is just only one of the examples, and then the scope is still not the broad scope like the whole portfolio, but it's the first step. But we send very strong signals saying that let's do the right thing and let's do things right. So it's the first step. Okay. By the way, if you see something like that and you know that it's our client, the company is our client, you can also have the whistleblowing here. So you inform us and we will investigate into that. In short, I'm talking about everything here is all about risk. That's the language that we know is important. So whatever we are talking about today, I will have to say that it is very important and we are committed to make a difference. We want to do that, but it's not us alone. All the stakeholders here must help us out. We have a regulator, by the way, when you say that your expectation is this, and this, I took a photo of that.
That's why we were laughing while you were speaking at one point. He's like, I better pay attention. And
So that is very important. And I'm really glad to hear that eventually there will be a collaboration from various agencies to help us out. Because maybe my wish will come true that eventually there will be a single voice. There will be a center where we can consult and ask questions, right? We don't have to do that by ourselves, so that's good. We need to get all of these stakeholders involved with this because we cannot do alone. Very importantly, when you're looking at the competition in the whole system here, if we want to do the right thing, unfortunately, we are the only one. Guess at the end of the day, what will you see? You will see that we lose customers. You will see we lose our market share. So why, when we do the right things, we are penalized by doing that? That's the key question. So if we want to change, we want to really get into these important things and then maintain human rights and try to block and prevent any violations of that. It's not one single entity. It has to be the whole system. All of these people, our customers, our employees, our regulators, with an S, many regulators, public, you guys as our customers, we have to do this together. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And by the way, the key issue is also this. We hear a lot of good stuff, a lot of good things, asking us to change and all of that. Well, sometimes it's not that easy. Allow time for us to change. Allow time for us to adapt. Because no, it's not going to happen tomorrow, that everything is great tomorrow. It's going to take a while. Because bad habits, old habits will change with difficulty. We are in that kind of process, okay? So what I'm saying here is that it's not just because we want to do it and we think that tomorrow we are going to attain it, but it's the whole process. And this darn process will not stop. So that means that when you're talking about sustainability, you're talking about sustainable finance and all the good words. That will require really long time to change. That will require huge amount of effort to go through various processes. And that will never end. That's the key point. So all of these are also the buzzwords that you all know. We continue to do that, and we will not stop as long as our mentality has changed for the better. All of this eventually will be in our DNA. And instead of saying, let's do this as a big bang, well, we have a big event, try to promote human rights and all of that, and tomorrow, everything will go back to the same thing. We just say that this is a long process. We make people aware, we make people understand, we make people buy into the concepts, we make them commit to this, and make them as the agent of change, and the whole thing will happen. Unless we do all of these things, nothing will happen. And I can guarantee that. I'm old enough to say this because I have seen so many programs. Okay. So, this is the anonymous American proverb saying that life is a journey, not a destination. I will leave you guys with this. Sustainability is a continuing journey, definitely not a destination. Thank you very much.
Wow. You did not disappoint. Kun Adit had big shoes to fill, but an amazing presentation. Thank you so much. I want to, I think on behalf of the whole audience, I want to say thanks for drilling down on corporate governance issues, but providing also some of the big picture messaging as well. For example, we need a level playing field. Kasikorn Bank cannot go out there in Thailand and do this alone. It will be, in competitive terms, it will start finding itself less profitable over time, right? Everyone must be in this at the same time. And that's why collaboration, a point stressed by all three of you, is so important. We need to collaborate together, adopt an all-in approach, a whole of government approach, a whole of industry approach to really shift the direction of capitalism today towards a more sustainable capitalism, the one that recognizes the limitations of our planet and the limitations that some of our activities have on society. So again, expression of gratitude. A quick question. Kunadit, I know that many banks have clients that they've had for years, sometimes even generations, the same clients coming back to them. Maybe it's a big company comes back to you again and again for new types of financing products. How do you encourage, let's say you come up with you present your human rights auditing to your board and they adopt it, and then you realize an older client may be falling afoul of the human rights review. How do you encourage one of your, not a new client, an older client, how do you include or encourage a business that you have an existing relationship to lift its game, to start taking ESG seriously, perhaps even human rights due diligence processes seriously?
Well, first of all, we need to be feeling like we are a promoter, not just only a bank in that sense. 2 levels. If it's something illegal, unfortunately, we can have a compromise on that. If it's illegal, it's illegal, and we're going to say, sorry, no. That's not even a tough call. Banks are supposed to comply with all the laws, right? Number 2, in terms of more a moral issue, something like that, if we don't act alone, meaning that the whole system is doing similar things and saying that this is a new norm, we're going to make this into a culture, not just only just feeling nice to do it, but it's a culture. If we make this into the Thai DNA, the national DNA, saying that we cannot tolerate this, eventually things will change. But you're right, that's a tough call. We see very old clients have been working with us. Yes, we need to take time and then just say that it is in between. We just have to communicate with them and then start to do this. And then sometimes we may have to ask the Bank of Thailand just to be named in the conversation and say, this is something we cannot do. By the way, something like that happens. So that's the key. So I'm just saying that that's why, going back to what I said just a little bit ago, don't make it as a big bang and then try to draw attention and nothing else will happen after that. It's a long process. You keep doing that and you just say that this is something with value, right? So if you do that long enough, pain will go away after a while. Like I said, it's numb, right? You feel numb or you feel buy-in with that. But after a while, instead of doing that because you are told to do that, it's going to happen automatically. And that's when we call a culture. So why don't we just start from, let's instill a new culture of what it counts, rather than just saying this is a nice program to make people pay attention on.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And I know that with you as a partner and as a co-collaborator in this effort, then the change in that culture is very likely. I'm sad to hear that you'll be retiring in 5 years, but I hope that doesn't mean that you'll be leaving us and your influence will wane. Please continue to collaborate with us for many, many years to come. Okay, so we still have, I think, a good 20 minutes or so. I'm looking for co-organizers. Kun Jae, I just saw you a moment ago. But we do have time for questions, as I recall. Yes, indeed. We have at least 20 minutes for questions. So I'm going to open it up to the floor and ask for our organizers to pass the mic around. We have one right here in front. May I get a microphone? At the sofa. I'll even donate my own. ขอโทษครับอ๋อที่นี่ครับ
Thank you very much for recognizing my hand. I'm
This couldn't
not from
be-
the banking sector, so I feel that I am at liberty to maybe make a comment today only on this in this particular setting, to making a comment and a question to a banker, and after that after this, I'm no longer accountable or responsible for whatever I said, or, or comment
Duly noted, duly noted.
about banker, because I could get into trouble, with my boss. But I was so inspired by Dr. Adit's comment about the situation that he described the bank being in, and I'm very happy. But I just have something that in my mind that bothers me all the time, and that is, why is it that every time something goes wrong, we always point the finger at the banker, the bank, and the bank, of course, says it has to do two things. One is to comply with regulations, with the regulatory bodies' demands, and in this case, of course, we have the Bank of Thailand here, which is above criticism at this moment. But when we come to the question of governance, then maybe they will have to answer some of the questions about this. But we're talking about social, the E and the E and the S in the ESG, and so definitely corporate company, a regular company like my own, or the one that I work for, and also the bank whom we have to borrow from. But every time something goes, it's always the bank that maintains a moral authority, or something that the bank puts itself as being, how should I say, in the driver's seat, so to say. But of course, the bank as a business and a company, as a regular company as like ours, which is also a business, we have to think about our stakeholders, right? Think about the interests of the stakeholders. But now we're talking about ESG. ESG is setting something much higher. But we face two challenges. One is doing ESG because of the pressure or the expectations from the public. But the second is doing the ESG with the bank. And we often find ourselves, let's say, being at the shorter end of the stick. So to say, something happens, the bank is not to blame. It's always the borrower. It's not the lender. It's the borrower. But sometimes I wonder if banks put themselves not only above criticism, but actually as being on a higher moral plane. And they always say that, it's the borrower's actually, fault for, or something, when something happens, it's always the borrowers who face the, how should I say, the music. But very few, much less in time when we feel, when the banker actually is the one that has to also answer, and has to face the music. So we're talking, I'm taking a long time, but it's a very complicated
Please.
Question. But something like, we can talk about green, we can talk about, doing all these sustainable goals, but this is different question now.
Can you hold
We
the
have
mic
Jeffrey
closer to
Epstein.
you? Thank you.
Jeffrey Epstein, and you know who he is.
Yes.
And then, of course, I like to know, I like to ask the question to the banker, what do you do in the case of, Jeffrey Epstein? How do you treat him as your client, a potential client? Does he pass your standards, the standards that you set in the ESG?
So I think there's a question to the bank, and there are several themes to your comment, which I appreciate very much. Thank you. One relates to where where fault lies, whether it should be with banks or it should be with borrowers, with both, and the complicated questions that arise from that. But the question that you actually ended with is, what do you do when you find that
a customer who maybe already you may already be lending to is found to be in grave breach of not just laws but of social norms. Jeffrey Epstein, for those of you who don't know him, is a very wealthy man in New York City who was implicated in trafficking in young women. So there's that example. Can I ask our bankers to respond just briefly to the very important comment from the gentleman?
Just to avoid answering in a specific case, I think when you're looking at a bank and you have a question why a bank would just have to be this or doing all of these high standard things, one thing to note, we are making money from taking deposits from you. That's huge. That's a huge responsibility. That's a huge accountability. As the agent, they will make money from bringing public deposits and then turn it around into loans and then make the money from interest. Why is it important? It's important because once we take something from the public, it is our responsibility to take care of that. That is on one count, that we take deposits from people. That's why the Bank of Thailand regulates us. And banking is heavily regulated, meaning that we take deposits. We need to take extra cushion to cover this, that, and that, so that when you guys come to the bank, everybody in this room come to the bank in one day and say that, I want my money back. I have to return every single baht that you asked for. That's a huge responsibility. That's why if we don't have the high moral standard, we're gonna destroy the trust that you trust us. That is extremely important. This is number one. Number two, on the same side, why customers to us always right? Why? Because it's not worth fighting to win. This is important because, you know, in so many cases you have read from social media, newspaper and all of that, and when they blame the bank, a lot of that actually we weren't guilty. But if we go to court just for the sake of winning from this case, the question is, how are we perceived in the eyes of public? A bank that wins the case on a customer, how good will that get? That's why, at the end of the day, you weigh between two sides. What are you going to choose? Winning? Or you take a good balance and say, oh, well, bad things happen. We have to swallow it and learn from it and just say that in the future, case like this, we'll be more careful. That is the whole process and dynamism of learning. So, number one, we take public money, we cherish, we take very, very good care of trust, public trust, the highest. Number two, there's no point of winning a small battle. Number three, we get huge amount of capital from shareholders to make business. We need to ensure we protect this capital to our best ability, make the capital grow, and then our shareholders will get that in the forms of dividend, capital gain, and all of that. Why? Because we need them. We want to grow, we need the capital. So we need to have a stewardship for the capital. We need to do that. All of this combined, we just say that unless we put ourselves in the high standard, I'm not talking about just K-Bank, I'm talking about all the banks in the system. Unless we put ourselves at the high level in terms of the moral standard and everything else to maintain the trust that we receive from public, we wouldn't be able to exist. Okay, so that is from my side, and I think that is a tough question, by the way, to answer. That's why we still...
A very able response, though. Excellent. Did you want to share some thoughts as well?
You
Mr.
mentioned
So?
bankers, so if I'm one of them, then I need to say something.
I'm sorry, it was with an
No,
S.
I think speaking on behalf as a staff of Rabobank, and I mentioned earlier already where the mission of the company is very, very straightforward. We all who work for Rabobank have to believe in the mission, right? Follow the vision. If we don't work for Rabobank, and the mission is growing a better world. So from a philosophical point of view, this gentleman, Mr. Einstein situation, sexual harassment, whatever you are. Very simple. All Rabobankers we have values at a personal level. The whole idea is, do we agree with the behavior of, let's say, a certain specific company or people? And we will have to be the judge. If we believe that is against let's say, the values of the company, because the values come from the mission, then we all have a very straightforward philosophical positioning, right? We will not bank with this kind of company or this kind of people, because it does not conform to the way we believe in doing business. Yeah. So yes, we are fiduciary. We have fiduciary responsibility to keep money in and lend money out. We have laws to follow. So that is clear. Yeah? Unlawful, irresponsible, we're not going to do it. But beyond that, at the philosophical level, I think it's very clear that we have a view on how we want to basically create and grow a better world. And I think examples that you just mentioned is certainly not in line with that. So not judging, but I think collectively, Rabobank, the institution, and the people who work for it, we owe it to our people to make sure that it is a proper direction. The inspiration we get has to be to do the right thing, and these are not going to be in that direction. It's against that direction, actually. So long answer to a short question.
No, a very good answer in that. Sir, a question up here. Thank you. Please introduce yourself to our panelists as well and to the audience, if you would.
My name is Prida Tiesuwan. I'm a businessman from Thailand. I see a lot of, I learn a lot from the three speakers, and of course the moderator yourself. This is something difficult to say from a man who is 70 years old. I see a lot of value there. And I wonder why, with that sort of value that we are seeing here, I wonder why the event of 2008 had happened. And we're still paying for it, the whole world. I happened to be in Davos in 2010 to sign off this SDG 17. And I can see how unpopular the bankers were at the time. Having said that, I'd like to thank your speech. I do believe that Dr. Adit, or Mr. Adit, Dr. Adit, should go on the TED Talk, for sure.
All three of them.
You have that quality. Dr. So, or Mr. So? Mr. So. I have to take this opportunity to thank you, your organization in particular, Rabobank. 22 years ago, when I began the venture of creating the business for society in this country, and we call it Social Venture Network, we had our first meeting in Amsterdam. At the end of our meeting, we were actually mixed by other people because it's a public place. There was a young, not very young, just short man with a curly hair, I still remember well, present himself that he from Rabobank, give us a card. And he said in the Dutch English, "Oh, I like what you present very much. And if you want to present your plan to our bank, maybe we can help you something." And we get our first seed money from your bank. Thank you very much, very, very much.
Thank you for that comment. That's very heartfelt, and I don't know. For me personally too, I do moderate quite often on various topics related to ESG and business and human rights. And I have to say, this is a very special panel. Some very sincere messaging going on here, and a lot of detail to support those messages. And I'm very appreciative of that as well. I'm also appreciative of the seed money that was provided for your venture. I see a hand in the middle row here, and after her, a gentleman, a very tall gentleman apparently, towards the back. So we'll go one and then two.
Hi, my name is Rosgamal, and I'm from the HSBC Thailand. I have a question for the panel. From your perspective, what is what is the key challenge for the banking or for the banks in Thailand to support the clients or businesses towards the low carbon economy? In other words, what have you found the challenges for for businesses in Thailand to move towards sustainability or green financing? Thank you.
Great. I'm going to put a hold on that question. We're going to have you answer. But then I'd also like to see if there's a question for Savisa from the Bank of Thailand as well. And then I'm going to start with Savisa and move down the panel that way. Is there another question that we could ask from our regulator? The gentleman with his hand up. Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Viravit from the Freedom Story. I'm from the civil society. So thanks for the panelists to share your thoughts and your candid opinions about that. As we have seen that nowadays we have seen disruptions in many business, and as one of the famous people said that banking is necessary, banks are not. And if we look at the issues of the cryptocurrency and blockchains and democratizations of banking, in that way we could see that there's a more awareness among the publics to mobilize the effort to have the social bankings that are responsible for the actions related to the ESG. So as you rightly point out that if the publics are not moving into the directions that would enforce ESG on the banks and then govern the banks to rules, then it would be quite difficult to move the bank into that direction. And I appreciate your candid opinion on that. So in this regard, would the banks and the Bank of Thailand be able to come up with the suggestions on how we could collaborate with the civil society? Because I think, like some of us mentioned, that capitalism may be seen as the greedy and nasty, but there's also a good side about that. And maybe that's something we can work towards that direction. So just to summarize my questions, if you look at the digital disruptions and how that would impact if the public is moving towards social impacts demand from the banks. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those two questions. I'm not going to try to condense them any further. Just turn it over to Savisa, then down the line, if I may.
Okay. Thank you very much. Those are very good questions, and for the challenges, I think on working on how we can integrate all this into the banking business. I think from what we've been talking with the bankers, a lot of the time is also knowledge and awareness, and how we can get everybody on the same page that there is a real business need in order to work towards sustainability. And on the second question with regards to the cryptocurrency, the democratization, and all the changes that are going on. We are aware of this, and we are at the Bank of Thailand. We also looking deeply into this matter, and as you know, we have the financial sector master plan, where we set out the policy going forward and what we would like to see the financial sector in the going forward in the future. And we are currently almost near the end of our third plan, and we are looking into the the changes in digitalization, the fourth industrial revolution, and how this is really affecting the the civil society, affecting the public, and the expectations that they have from the financial industry. And this is something that I think is it's a lot of collaboration is needed, and we do work together with a lot of now we work together with NGOs and the civil society and a lot of stakeholders, and I think it's something that we are definitely, it's a conversation and it's a journey, like Dr. Adit said, that we keep on going on. Yes.
Thank you. Kunso? I'm sorry, Mr. So? Kunso, please.
It so happened that I mentioned earlier that apart from two transactions, one for the Chinese giant COFCO and the other one for Olam, a big regional supply chain player, it so happened that the third one that we are trying to do now, in progress is happen to be, let's say it's a Thai client, yeah. And I just want to make I think I'm responding to the lady from HSBC. There's this evolution of broadly green financing, yeah. You know, it started off many years ago, 7 years ago, where if you have a project, and that project has got some green elements to it, you finance that project as a project finance, and the money must go to the project, yeah. So that was difficult, yeah. That was far and few in between. Recently, there is the SLL, right? So these are all the sustainably linked loans, yeah, and that is a bit easier. So if you have a building that is now, you know, with the system, the aircon and so on, there's energy saving, then that building can be financed through a SLL, right? So it's easier. Guess what? It's getting more easier now. So the transaction, for example, that we are doing for this particular Thai player, I mean, this is one of the world's largest sugar player. It sells to the world, and it wants to make a commitment to reduce carbon footprint. It wants to make a commitment to reduce energy. Very importantly, it wants to make a commitment to reduce water. A lot of you don't know this, but water is super important, not properly priced in this world today. One fine day, there will not be enough water, there will be no agriculture, and there will be no subsistence now. This company wants to make a statement there, and we're helping the company to make sure that the investor out there would appreciate this. Well, the test is in the pudding, so maybe another time when I see you, I'll tell you it's a successful syndication. So that is probably my specific answer to your question.
Thank you. Dr. Adi.
Can I say all of the above? Or?
Yes, all of the above and?
I think the issue on the carbon emission and all of that, I have to be blunt with you that it's very difficult in Thailand. Why? Because people don't care. You know how difficult it is just to explain what climate change is? Global warming? It's hard. And when you can't make sense out of that to people in general, nobody wants to do anything. Why bother? We were guilty because as a banker, we thought that we didn't emit much at all into the atmosphere. Sorry, this is a talk with shame. We thought that because we didn't really do anything, we didn't generate anything, we didn't really have to manufacture anything. I was wrong. When we started to calculate and we started to at least try to understand all of these concepts, thanks to DJSI, made our life more difficult, realized that we actually emit about 100,000 tons into the atmosphere. And then Midpon, the company, helped us because we bought some carbon to offset what we have emitted. It took us a while. It took us a while to just realize that it was important. And now it is important. It's even harder to make people or persuade them thinking in the same direction. Sometimes it's beyond us as a bank. Sometimes I think maybe the government should actually put more attempt to make this into a national agenda. Perhaps. The whole world is talking about, with the exception of the United States, the whole world is talking about climate change. We don't talk about anything. In the morning, we read the newspapers. What are they talking about? Sometimes I really think that it doesn't matter to the nation at all. Sorry to be blunt. But just to answer the first question, perhaps it's time to do it and put it as the national agenda before saying something like, well, this client, doing something bad, this client doing something good. Make it into something of a public awareness, a huge one. Maybe it will make a big difference. Okay? That was my question. The second question about the disruption, well, you're asking the right company. We have been disrupted here and there, left and right, during the past few years. Starting from new regulations, stringent regulations, market conduct, digital movement and all of that, behavior of our customers and all of that. Yes, they are all happening. But when you're looking at the concept of sustainability, that will raise one very important issue. Are those emerging risks? If they are, it is our duty as a company to mitigate them. When you see something is about to happen, you have a few choices. Ignore that. Do something today, betting on the future that things may or may not happen. Business is like that. You need to bet. If you have good enough information, make a decision, bet. You will never, ever have perfect information in your life, by the way. I learned that personally. I learned that as a banker and all kinds of things, right? So I'm just saying that when we are looking at all of these disruptions, 2 or 3 years ago, we didn't even know how things would turn out. We thought, well, the digital world is coming. It's going to change a lot of things. So my boss, CEO, he said, well, let's establish a new company under our wings called that KPTG Kasikorn Business Technology Group. Why? So that they can think about something a banker like us will not know, i.e. technology, change in all of those kind of things. They are IT people. We transfer IT people from the whole bank into this new entity and own that 100%. You know, when they just say that they don't have to be bankers anymore, they were so happy. Happy to the point that they could innovate a few more things. And that's what the technology is all about. We'll make them stay in a place that they can take higher risk. By the way, that is also good risk. Without taking more risk, no innovation will happen. All the light bulbs, airplanes and all of that, if the experiments didn't kill a few people, we wouldn't have had all the lighting and the planes. So I'm saying that this is something just to counter the trend or the potential disruption or already disrupted the business here. And it will never stop. But we have the duty, because we take the capital from shareholders, to ensure that if we realize there will be new risks, we need to take care of that in so many forms. And you know, from time to time, we need to adjust, review, change our strategy. Why? The world is moving so fast. And we do that, we still do that. And by the way, I'm not talking about K-Bank alone. All the banks in the system that you can see, we are moving similarly, because this is oligopolistic setting. We talk about the same thing, we do the same thing, we copy each other out. At the end of the day, who gets there first will win. But other than that, well, we are in the same pool. So we're going to see the same issues, same problems. So, and again, if we take the capital from our shareholders, it is our duty to counter that kind of disruption.
Yes, please, Savisa, one last comment.
Yes, I really enjoyed that, Dr. Adit's speech. And I just like to add a bit that, you know, like technology, they said it's with new risks, but there's also new opportunities. And for example, you know, for looking at the society problems, you know, and what part of the developmental work that we do is, you know, how can we use technology to bring it down to those people without financial access? How can we make it easier for people who, you know, to access financial services but with the new technology that comes? And not only that, you know, how can we even serve all parts of the society, you know, people who, and technology now, you know, is something that has helped a lot of people with disabilities as well. And, you know, it has been made them easier for them to have access to information and have better livelihoods. And as this is something that we really work together, you know, with other international organizations as well on, you know, using the opportunities that come with technology and digitalization in order to make it more efficient and give new opportunities for those.
Great. Kunso. Of course, please.
No, I really must say this. No, I just want to say, in case I don't have a chance to say, it's all about taking your own personal responsibility. What can you do? Everyone in this room, yeah? What can you do, yeah? Put your deposit in green bank like Kasikorn Bank, yeah? You know, if you go to KFC now in Hong Kong, chances are 1 in 3 that you have a hamburger with a patty there that is plant-based. They won't tell you, yeah? But it is 1/3 of that, yeah? The cost of producing that may be a little bit more, but KFC sells it the same price, yeah, to produce so. But guess what? Plant-based protein obviously takes so much less to produce, so much low carbon emission, yeah? So, vote with the feet, yeah? Bank with the right bank, eat with the right food. Don't fly to Bangkok, do a video conference because the aircraft that you fly is so much, yeah, things like that. So take your own responsibility and it will happen, that's his message.
again, more powerful messages and more powerful themes for us to contemplate. You know, the tagline for our event on this national dialogue is sustainable financing, what companies need to know. And I think we've given some good coverage of the things that companies need to know. Some of the themes, again, risk and imperfect information, the role of technology in helping us to realize benefits and rights, but also, of course, the role of values in sustaining business, in sustaining our environment. I hope you have enjoyed this panel as much as I have, and I'd ask you to join me in giving our panelists a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you very much for stimulating presentation and discussion from the panel. หลังจากนี้นะคะก็จะเชิญทุกท่านร่วมกันรับประทานอาหารกลางวันที่ห้องซิลเวอร์ชั้นใต้ดินนะคะแล้วเราจะกลับมาเจอกันอีกทีตอนเวลาบ่ายโมง15 นาทีนะคะยังมี2หัวข้อที่น่าสนใจนะคะก็คือธุรกิจกับสิทธิมนุษยชนและการประเมินความเสี่ยงของภาคธุรกิจและหัวข้อสุดท้ายก็คือต้นแบบที่ดีของภาคธุรกิจในการขับเคลื่อนธุรกิจที่เคารพหลักการ sustainable banking นะคะทุกท่านสามารถรับคูปองรับประทานอาหารกลางวันได้ที่หน้าห้องประชุมนะคะจะมีเจ้าหน้าที่คอยแจกอยู่ค่ะ Okay. You are all welcome to have lunch break at Silver Room, ground floor. And we will come back again around 1:15.